Hi, I'm Jarrett Fuller. Welcome to Scratching the Surface. It feels really good to be back after our summer hiatus. I am a few weeks into teaching my new semester, adjusting to the change of pace that this time of year brings. And as I tend to do, I'm finding myself thinking about why we do what we do, why I do what I do. Why do I teach? Why do I teach designers? What does it mean to teach designers today? What does it mean to be involved in a higher education system today, in this moment, in this country, when so much feels so unstable, whether that is the sustained attacks we're seeing on academic institutions to uncertainty around artificial intelligence? So for our first episode back, I wanted to focus on these questions. I wanted to focus on education. Design education, of course, but also education more generally. And so I'm really excited to be joined by the president of the new school, Joel Towers. Towers stepped into this role as the new school's 10th president a year ago. And it's been a strange year, I think, to be trying to lead a university. But I also wanted to have him on the show because he's trained as an architect, making him one of the few, the only, architect/university president. Joel studied architecture at the University of Michigan and received his Master of Architecture from Columbia University's Graduate School of Architecture Planning and Preservation. In 1992, he co-founded SR&T, where together with his partners, he completed award-winning projects that considered the intersections of architecture and sustainability. In 2004, he joined the new school's Parsons School of Design as a faculty member and the school's first director of sustainable design and urban ecology, and went on to serve in a series of roles. Listen to this. In 2006, he was named Associate Provost of Environmental Studies and founded the university's Tishman Environment and Design Center. From 2007 to 2009, he served as the founding dean of the School of Design Strategy and as associate dean of Parsons. And then from 2009 to 2019, he served as the executive dean of Parsons before taking the role of president of the new school in 2024. I was fascinated by this trajectory, but I was also fascinated about how these different positions shape his perspective on education. So in this conversation, President Towers and I talk about the role of the university and higher education more generally in this moment, how leading a university is a type of architectural project, how to get the most out of collaboration, how his time in graduate school studying architecture in the late 80s and early 90s shaped how he approached architecture, and what he'd tell design students graduating today into this uncertain world. It's a really great conversation and a perfect way, I think, to kick off our new season. If you like what we do here, if you want to support this new season and the work that we do, please consider joining our Substack. We have a monthly newsletter called The Monthly Dispatch that is free for everyone, but we also have a paid tier that gets you bonus interviews each month and help keep this show free for everybody all the time. Our paying subscribers really enable us to do this work and to keep the show going. So if you want more of this in the world, please consider signing up and supporting our work. President Towers, thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure.
We are speaking 1 year almost to the day of your appointment as the 10th president of the new school. How's it been? How'd the first year go? How are you feeling about everything?
Really? The first year as a new president at this time.
I was going to let you say that, not me.
Yeah. It's a great question. I'm still around, which is, I suppose, the greatest test of what the first year as being
Right.
university president is in 2025. It's always, I think, an interesting. It's a really interesting challenge when you take on a new role in an institution that you know so well, that, you're kind of, I've been at the New School for more than 20 years. So in some ways, it's been everything I might have expected. The challenge is you can't say, "Oh, I'm surprised,"
Right. Right.
when you've been there 20 years. And in other ways, it's been entirely new. And but in each instance, it's been absolutely exhilarating. I'm loving the work. It's a complicated, difficult job in normal times. We don't live in normal times.
Yeah.
And so every day there are demands on my creativity, my
Mhm.
passion, my um, ability to connect with our students, our staff, our faculty, the larger community, and it it brings out the hopefully I hope it certainly challenges me to bring out the best of who I am and what my um, where my knowledge is and where my background is as a designer and how I bring that to everything I do. So it's been an amazing year. It's been exhausting, but it's been amazing.
We'll get into the design piece in a second, but I want to dig a little deeper into those challenges that you were talking about. And I want to ask this in a way to help kind of frame what you are talking about, actually, not just realizing that there might be listeners who don't know what the new school is and don't know the structure of the new school. And so the new school, basically, if I were to describe it, is this collection of various kind of semi-autonomous schools. So there's the Parsons School of Design, where you were executive dean for a while. I taught there for a couple years. There's Eugene Lang College of Liberal Arts. There's a College of Performing Arts, New School for Social Research, Schools of Public Engagement. All of these together total 126 degrees and diplomas. How do you see your role as college president overseeing all of those? What are you actually doing, or how do you see what you do in relationship to all of these schools that report up into what we know as the new school?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that different than how you would think about any university
Mm,
structure. We're a mid-sized university, right? Roughly between 9 and 10,000 students. As you say, we've got all of these different divisions. Those divisions have their own logic and history. In some cases, they joined the university
right,
throughout their history. Parsons, for example, is founded in 1896, but joins the New School in 1970.
right,
The New School is founded in 1919. So Parsons is older than its parent in this
right,
case.
right.
The same with Mannes School of Music. It's founded a couple of years before the New School, and it joins the New School in 1989.
Mm,
And so that's one way that the group comes together as a collection of colleges. And then there are the colleges that found the new school. And it wasn't started, by the way, as a university. It didn't say, oh, we're going to be a university. It starts as a place that offers adult education,
mm,
non-degree, was not focused on
mm,
offering degrees to those adults. It was really founded on the premise that the social sciences, that the knowledge associated with the introduction of a kind of rethinking about the economic structure, the political structures, the rise of an industrial economy and the impacts that has on democracy. John Dewey is a kind of key
right,
intellectual forebearer of the New School and a collaborator with the founders. And it basically says, look, higher education as delivered in universities is not meeting the challenges of our time. And we think this knowledge matters. And so we're just going to introduce it to the world at large, mostly adults. And it wouldn't be until several years later, 1933, that the new school brings a graduate faculty of social sciences together through what was called the University in Exile, became known as the University in Exile, which was a response to an effort to rescue European scholars who were fleeing Nazi Germany. And so we become a place of refuge. And we also, at the time, uh, really expand the ranks of our social science faculty in that context. Throughout, and really interestingly, the social sciences were seen in relation to the arts and culture. There's beautiful essays by Alvin Johnson, who would become the first director and then
Hmm.
president of the New School, in which he's articulating uh, how important it is to engage with the arts and culture in the context of educating around the social sciences, that it wouldn't be enough to just educate economists or philosophers. And he brings Jose Clemente Orozco, the great Mexican muralist, to the New School, and Thomas Hart Benton to produce two absolutely extraordinary murals that are part of our first purpose-built building that is constructed in 1930-31. So right in the beginning of the Great Depression. And these murals are they're the physical embodiment of the commitment to the role of the arts in
Right.
education. And it's really incredible. And then early on, you would have social scientists engaging with artists and graphic designers from the time who were teaching courses at the New School. And this was somehow deepening their understanding of the field. I mean, it's just amazing stuff. Meanwhile, none of like Parsons is off on its own. It's still
Right.
independent. There's no, we're not, he builds a auditorium, right? So the building is designed by Joseph Urban, who's better known, right, for his work in stage and theater design.
Yeah.
And he builds one of the most profound advanced performance halls in New York City in 1930. And it's to this day, this sort of egg-shaped, beautiful
Yeah.
auditorium on 12th Street. It's a performance hall.
Yeah.
I mean, it would later host Martin Luther King Jr. as a speaker, and many, many others, but it's a performance hall. And why are they building a performance hall for a school of social research? I mean, it's just fascinating. And a dance theater, all of this stuff,
Right.
stage. So the school has always been at that intersection. And so your question, like, what am I doing? What's an architect doing as the president of a university?
That's not what I asked, but yeah, you can answer that one too.
Well, there aren't that many of us, right?
Right.
Right? It's not often the case that designers end up leading the university.
Yeah.
But in this case, it feels very natural to who we are. And some of those divisions that you mentioned, for example, Parsons is about 60% of the entire university at the new
Right.
school in terms of numbers today. That wasn't the case in 1970 when it joined. It was actually quite small.
Right.
And so it's a place that has kind of changed over time. Design has become, I think, fundamental to its outlook and creativity, but it always had it embedded
Yeah.
in arts.
That's really interesting. I mean, I asked you that question really just to kind of position where you were coming from, but you actually set up basically every other question that I was going to ask you in that answer. I did not know that full history. So thank you for that. I want to start with something you said right at the beginning of that answer, where you said that the new school was founded with this belief that higher education was not meeting the moment. It was not doing the thing that it set out to do, which sounds like something we might hear today about higher education. And so I'm wondering, what was your pitch when you were going up for this job? How did you think about what it means to lead the new school, or what is the new school's role in American culture, in the world, today in 2024, when you started in 2025? Now, the announcement mentioned your work on sustainability. That seems to be an important part of this, but how did you sort of lay out what your vision of the new school in 2025 should or could look like?
So, Jared, I'll give you the direct quote from 1918,
Okay.
and I keep it on my desk,
Okay.
right? This is in 1918, the organization committee for the new school writes this document for what the need for an independent school of social sciences for men and women, which just think about that
Yeah.
in 1918, right?
Yeah.
And the very first sentence says the political and social problems forced upon the country by the economic development of the past 25 years call for a new type of leadership in every field of American life.
Which
That's the
does
that
not seem familiar at all for us today.
right? I mean, you could write that today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the
That's
answer to your
amazing.
question is what's the pitch is I just refer back to this. I'm like,
Right.
do take that heuristic, look back over the course of the last quarter century and ask the question, what do we need to be learning? What are the core questions facing society? And what is the role of education in helping to address and ameliorate and advance? And so when I do that, it's literally technology is one of these things we talk a lot about, right? That is changing rapidly. I would
Right.
argue it's a core thematic area in understanding our lives, the future of intelligence and knowledge, the future of democracy.
Hmm.
We can go anywhere you want on that. But technology is a theme. 25 years ago, we were all collectively holding our breath and hoping that Y2K didn't happen.
Right. Right. Right.
So just, you think about it, it's like what has happened just in those 25 years? The first iPhone isn't even introduced until 2007, 2008,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
We're and yet today these technologies are so ubiquitous. And social media is it's not even in the imagination, really.
Yeah.
And so today, as we talk about artificial intelligence, as we think about the role of technology, the way in which it collapses or extends distance, all of these, like we are desperately, in my opinion, in need of an education that can engage with technological change through the lens of what it means for humanity, what does it mean
Mm,
for the planet, and
yes.
all. So my own personal area of research as an architect has always been at the intersection of climate change, sustainability, and design. I've been working in this area for over 30 years. And so if you said to me, what are some of those other thematics? Uh, Climate change is the biggest um, structural change to
Yeah.
to our uh, to the planet, to our species, to all of the ways we organize and think about our future. And again, if you think about not just the last 25 years, although that's a good frame, over the course of the last 30 years, more CO2 has been put in the atmosphere
Right.
than
Right.
in all of human history combined.
Right.
And so again, you go back and you're like, is this a problem of the 1850s and coal burning in
Right.
London? Right? Yes, but it's a modern
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
It's this generation. And our students are going to live out the entire 2100s. They
Right.
will graduate and they will live through this 21st century. And so when I do my work, I just spent 5 years co-chairing the New York City's panel on climate change,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of like the IPCC for New York City. And
Right.
it's the first time a designer was a co-chair of that.
Mm.
Because in part, the science has gotten to a place where like it's really about the app. What do we do with the
Yeah.
knowledge?
Yeah.
And so Mayor de Blasio had appointed me to that, and it was a really interesting collaboration between scientists and designers and policymakers and so forth. But when you do that work, as I have for so long, and you're constantly talking about 2150, 2170, right?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
this stuff, like our students' lives are going to be lived in 2030, 2050, 2070. And so again, our obligation is to think about how are we educating today and how are we doing research today so that those students are prepared to be change agents
Mm-hmm.
in the adaptation and mitigation, and I would argue the really important question of how are they building a better life
Yeah.
in the future. And so my pitch was, this is the new school. That's where
Right.
we're
This is
supposed
what
to,
it's always been. Yeah.
what it's always been. But we're not starting from scratch now, right? It's 2024. And I'm like, okay, we need to figure out how to take the clay that we have and shape it into that future.
Well, let me ask you a really specific question because I'm hearing you say all of that. And what strikes me is, and we're two designers, we're two people who have spent our careers in design education. That to me sounds like the pitch of design education over the last 20 years, last 30 years. How do you think spending your career thinking about design education first has shaped how you're thinking about higher education more generally? Or maybe this is going to be an egotistical sounding question, but are there things from design education that higher education can learn and adapt more broadly? Talk to me about that exchange from thinking about this for designers to thinking about this for everybody, for all students.
You know, I'm going to answer the question by positing, I think, something pretty fundamental to design education, which is that designers believe in the future.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to design if you don't believe in the
Right.
future.
Right.
And I don't mean that in a kind of, naive and uh, some sort of positivist frame for the
Right.
future. It's not
Right.
like we're and believe me, we're as easy a group to get inspired by dystopia as anyone.
Yeah.
And so the appeal of the critical view of the future is something that Hollywood makes its, entire existence on. So it's not just a positive future, but at the fundamental root of design is a commitment that through human action and
Mm-hmm.
engagement and critical reflection, there is a chance to make the world better.
Yeah.
And and we fail all the time at it. So don't again, I'm not like we're not perfect, but
Right.
you believe in this framework. And once you've and sometimes we'll call it futuring when we're being yeah.
Yeah.
Um, if you believe that that is part of the objective of education, part of the objective of design, and then you think, how am I teaching design? And how am I really helping people be um, critical of the ways in which that very notion can also be about the preservation of privilege and power and all of the various ways in which you'd want to break down that
Yes.
framework and still believe that you are contributing something to the broader social ecological future and that it's a beautiful thing, right? We also believe
Yeah.
in it. We believe in beauty. We believe in aesthetics. We
Yeah.
believe in passion and engaging people's inspiration, right? Design that has no passion is dead.
Yeah.
And so we're playing with so much of human um, ambition, hope, optimism, so many of the things that make us human. And it's that framework applied to higher education that I think has gotten lost a little bit in some of the sort of contemporary discussions around higher ed, about its relevance, about the culture wars that are, constantly pushing it one way or the other. In the end, it's ultimately a collective enterprise toward advancement, progress. That's to me, by the way, what I mean by a progressive education
Yeah.
is progress.
Yeah.
And it's an expansion of rights, it's an inclusion of people. Um, and so being a designer, and I was actually I was a carpenter before I was an architect. So being a builder,
Yeah.
being a designer, believing that my actions are about shaping and improving, that's what then drives me to think this is not a question of design, it's a question of education across
Right.
field.
And I think what we can learn from design, or something that's inherent in the designer's sensibility in what you're saying, is that this is not a theoretical exercise. This is not just an idea about how to expand rights, how to make the world more flourishing for everybody, but it's actually about making things, taking actionable steps to make those things reality. And that is something I think designers understand, and when they're working at their best. And I think, like you said, that is something that is now relevant across all forms of education.
Yeah. I mean, there's the moment we're in, and reflecting back as you asked me about the year,
Yeah.
the moment we're in is a moment. The the challenge to higher education and its relevance is a long-standing question. And so it gets filtered through the politics of a particular moment. But that's not the interesting question to me. The interesting question to me is how are we going to actually address the transformative obligation and opportunity that we have uh, as a species living in a moment on a planet in peril? What are we going to do? And so I think higher education is an absolutely fundamental, critical space to help think through and then take action on those, help people take actions on those challenges.
You're hitting at one of the main reasons that I was interested in you and interested in talking to you. And like you said at the beginning, there are not many architects turned college presidents. And I'm wondering if you could kind of talk about how those two sides may or may not be related. How did studying architecture, working as an architect, being a practicing architect, are there things from that that shape how you do what you're doing now? Do you see this work as related in some way?
I see it as completely related. I tell this story about my one of my earliest architecture professors from my undergrad when I was at the University of Michigan. It's an absolutely brilliant woman named Sharon Sutton, Dr. Sharon Sutton, who was my first studio professor. And we've stayed in touch over the years. And then she ended up out on the West Coast. And now she's actually teaching. She's teaching at Parsons,
Oh,
believe it or
wow. Wow.
not. She's been teaching for 50 years. It's an amazing woman.
Wow.
And when I became the dean of Parsons, not just at this level, but when I became the dean of Parsons, she wrote me a note that said, "Why have you gone over to the dark side?" That was her question. And she meant it in the sort of, it's an administrative role.
Right.
Like, why are you this architect, educator? Why are you going over to the dark side? And I wrote back to her and I said, it's a design project, Sharon.
Mm,
This work to me is a design project. It's not
yeah.
a narrow administrative, it's not a bean counting project.
Right.
This is about how you bring design to the future of, at that time, Parsons School of Design. And it's the same question today as president of the new
Yeah.
school. This to me is the most wonderful, exciting, complex design project. And architecture is never done in isolation.
Right.
It's a collaborative enterprise. The whole notion of the architect at the head of the table, all that, is this a family show? Can I just say that's
Yeah.
bullshit?
Yeah. Of course.
I mean, it's a figure,
Right.
and it is a figure that should be wildly criticized in that frame. Architecture is about working with and collaborating with others in order to achieve something way bigger than any one individual can achieve. and it requires a pretty radical form of collaboration, not just among the
Right.
various players in the building, in the financing, in the client or the agency that is, for which the architecture is intended, the intergenerational responsibility you have when
Mhm.
you take those resources from the earth and you have to pay back that environmental cost.
Right.
Like, there are generations yet to be born, and we are constraining their future through our actions today. And so architecture has all of this complexity to it. And it's kind of like that with a university. There are all of
Yeah.
these faculty who are brilliant and have all of their own work and their research, and they're committed to their teaching. Their universities tend to attract administrators and staff who are mission driven.
Mm,
They
hmm.
they come to a university because they care.
Right.
And of course, we have this incredible obligation, responsibility for students. And so it's just like a dream to be able to be in that. It feels
Yeah.
like an immense privilege, but it's
Yeah.
also um, it's a space very much in need of redesign. I use the phrase remaking because it's not from zero. There's a lot that
Yeah.
remains, but the space needs to be remade.
Yeah. It's the reason I asked you that, and I was going to ask you if you thought running a school was an architectural project, which you answered yes, without me even asking that. So you saw where I was taking this. But the reason I was even thinking about those connections, and this might be a stretch, so just go with me for a second. But I was thinking about the era that you were studying to be an architect. This is in the mid '80s, if I'm not mistaken. First at University of Michigan, and then graduate school at Columbia. And this is a really interesting time in architectural history, I think. This is a moment when architects were questioning the profession, questioning whether building buildings was actually the thing they wanted to do. This is the emergence of paper architecture. There's a kind of robust architectural theory that's happening at this time. This is the sort of the rise of the computer, and this question of what is the role of digital in architecture. Bernard Schumi, who you may have overlapped with, if I'm
Yep.
right, at Columbia, who
Right.
was dean at Columbia, he was involved in a lot of these conversations. What really emerges in my reading of this era of architectural history is that architecture doesn't just have to be the construction of buildings, but is a way of seeing the world. It is a lens through which you can apply these ideas to anything. And I'm wondering if you studying architecture in that era where all these questions were being raised, how did that shape you? How did that shape how you approach architecture, but also how does that shape how you approach your role now?
Yeah. I went from Jim Polshek to Bernard Schumi during the
Okay.
time of my graduate study.
Okay.
So if that gives you a lens, right?
Wow. Yeah.
From one dean to the other. And it was an absolutely fascinating time. And then Bernard hired me later to
Right.
teach the first studios on sustainable design,
Mm.
which was so yes, that period of time was like I think everybody would describe the time they went to school as transformative. I would hope they would. But for me, that shift and the early introduction of technology
Mhm.
into the field, right? We had literally no computers uh, in at Columbia when I started, other than some word
Okay.
processors, so you could write your papers.
Right.
And by the time I left, as I told you, I was a carpenter. I was also running the Columbia Woodshop, and we would build the very first computer room for some very early modeling capabilities that would be written by a faculty member who would create something called GSDL, that stood for the Graduate School Design Language, which was literally, I mean, the first editions of AutoCAD were just coming into the field.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
So it's really the beginning of CAD as a tool. It's Bernard would get some SGI computers, Silicon Graphic computers, right? So uh, I remember Bob Greenberg from RGA gave a talk about computer animation in those early years. I think this is when I was teaching there, and everybody was just blown away by what was possible with computer modeling. But it was all Hollywood in that sense. We didn't know what it meant. So this was a really interesting transition, and also there was a big recession at that time. But there were no jobs in architecture. And so you had to be really innovative about how you would come out into the field. So all of this was in question. Deconstruction was in architecture was all the rage. There would be huge battles between the humanists and deconstructionists at Columbia, um, and Ken Frampton navigating the whole thing for everybody. I mean, it was just an amazing time. Um, and so yeah, it did influence me. I was the long-haired, ponytailed tree hugger amidst this whole technological explosion. So I was a little countercultural myself, and for me, I was already navigating this question of nature and technology and climate, and that would emerge from my really from before that. But as in graduate school, I realized that's what I was going to do. And so I had a narrower path because that work wasn't really happening right yet in the field, at least not in its contemporary form. There's work from the 60s that's relevant, and the 70s, but 1987, the Brundtland Commission report on sustainable development, it's the term is just entering the lexicon. I had to explain to my parents what sustainability meant, you know. Um, and for that matter, I had to explain it to Bernard too. Um, because it
Yeah.
really wasn't in the field yet. And so I was a bit of an outcast in that regard.
Okay.
Um, but I knew that for me, that it goes back to your earlier question. It was integrating the role of the human and where the field is going.
Yeah.
And I think I know actually that a constant back and forth, that dialectic has motivated everything I've done as a builder, as an architect, as an educator, and as a now as a president. And I think it allows me, I hope it allows me the ability to collaborate with colleagues who come from the humanities, who come
Hmm.
from the social sciences and the liberal arts, and who bring to their work a kind of commitment to what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And the designers and the media makers and the performers who are just we're capturing and creating the culture. We're uh, we're structuring the world as it structures us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Making the artifacts that will. And so it's very much, I think you're right. It's that time is very profoundly in me today still.
I want to ask you about collaboration since you were just talking about that, but I have one other question that I was not planning on asking you, but I got to thinking about it as you were reminiscing on that era, and it strikes me, and we already were talking about the parallels between the birth of the new school in 2025. It strikes me that there's some interesting design parallels or design rhymes from the 1980s and today. There's an unstable, volatile economy. There's kind of rapid cultural and political change. There's the emergence of new technologies. All of these things when you were in school and in studying architecture, also there's a version of this in graphic design, which was kind of causing a rethinking of what do we do? Are we just tools for capitalism? Are we just making things look good to sell more things? How do we figure out our place here? And that created this really robust discourse that's kind of rethinking what does it mean to be an architect? What does it mean to be a designer? I think about my students today who are going through a similar era and are feeling similarly. I have heard from a lot of students who are studying design and then they're like, do I really want to do this? Is this actually like, is this all it is? Do you have advice? Do you have thoughts? Do you have like, what would you tell a design student today who's operating in this context, who's having all those questions that you were having 40 years ago? Um, how do you navigate that? How, as somebody who's coming into the field with all those same questions, um, how would you have them think about that?
Yeah. You know, I'm often asked the question through the lens of, how did you decide to be an architect or, right?
Yeah.
And my answer is I'm still deciding.
Right. Right.
And I mean that genuinely. It's not that, I mean, I'm a licensed architect. I'm an architect.
Yeah.
Right? But the field is always asking me to ask the question again and again.
Yeah.
And so the question for a student today is not one of kind of linear progression. I assure them that you can end up as a university president,
Right. Right.
right?
Or a podcaster.
Or a
Yeah.
podcaster, or a carpenter.
Right.
And it's all fine. And right. And so the
Right.
question is not some kind of artificial like I know what I'm going to be for my whole life.
Yeah.
It's educating students to do two things. One is what do they need to know in the next 5 to maybe 5 years? I used to think we could say 5 to 10, maybe it's 5 years.
Yeah.
What do they need to know to be able to advance in this process, advance in their career, advance through higher education, if that's what they want to do? What's the knowledge they need to succeed today? We have an obligation to teach them that. The second half is how do you teach them to acquire new knowledge over time?
Right.
Because that curiosity, that introspection, that willingness to question, to ask, to really explore the larger world and to be self-critical and self-reflective, that's the that is the absolutely fundamental skill set for succeeding in a world that's more rapidly, feels to me at least, is more rapidly in
Yeah.
transition
Yeah.
than it might have been in the 80s, or it might have been in the 60s or the 40s. We can just and each has their crisis moments. We there are different wars, there are different political moments, right? All of this stuff. There's always crisis, there's always rapid change. It probably always feels to the people living in a particular time like, oh, it's changing faster now than ever before. But I do think the kinds of collaboration, and we'll come to that, I gather, that we have with inanimate objects like machines and machine learning, the kinds of collaboration we have across species, the understandings of the movements and functions of the
Yeah.
planet, all of these things, we are exponentially expanding our knowledge and our impact. And that is causing all sorts of disruption. And some people feel left behind by that. Technology always leaves people behind, and people worry about that. And some people feel that the world is changing culturally
Right.
so fast, and their norms don't matter as much as they used to. And so um, there's political variation across the nation, across the world. And so all of that, I think, demands of us a kind of heterogeneity and a flexibility and
Mm.
also a seriousness. And so, and a joy.
Yeah.
And I'm going
Yeah.
to go back to beauty, right? Because
Yeah.
you can I think if you inspire change through fear and through a kind of giving in to the least ambitious,
Yeah.
you end up moving backwards in time and value, and that's not humans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, there are plenty of humans do it, but
Yeah.
it's not the best of who we are.
So you actually set up I was really interested in talking to you about these ideas of collaboration because that is so foundational to the development of the new school, as you set up at the beginning of this conversation. And it strikes me that the problems or issues that we are facing today that you set up at the beginning are the goals of the institution of higher education are big problems that cannot be solved by any one discipline, any one segment, any one school within the new school. These are inherently multidisciplinary problems. They need collaboration. I've found that everybody, and this is a generalization, I'm just going to say that everybody loves to talk about collaboration. Everybody loves to talk about multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary projects. But then there's also a kind of academic institution desire to stay in your lane, to have clear borders, to make sure that everybody knows what their role is. I think this happens outside of the institution too. Capitalism, keep everybody in their spot on the assembly line kind of idea. How do you navigate that? How do you negotiate that? How are you thinking about that today, looking at the role of the new school that you've articulated? How do you actually encourage real collaboration? How do you actually start to see schools talk to each other and work together? How are you approaching that?
One of the pleasures of being a new president is you get to be asked questions by members of the community, and so a group of students from our from I think it was the Free Press, but it was a group of students who said, asked me a bunch of questions in the
Yeah.
first go around, and one of them was about collaboration. And I said something to the effect of collaboration is humanity's superpower.
Mm,
And I mean that in evolutionary terms, right?
yeah.
We are a species whose capacity is um, multiplied exponentially when we collaborate. Now, I was very quick to point out that collaboration is not necessarily a positive term.
Right.
It's actually a neutral term.
Right. I actually have your quote here because I wanted to ask you about that. You say collaboration is neutral on the moral, ethical, social, even infrastructural application of its power. People collaborate to achieve the most far-sighted, joyful, and positive change, and they collaborate in the production of harm. It is a choice or sometimes a trade-off. Education can be a powerful force in directing collaboration towards just and resilient futures for people and the planet. Anyway, I'm sorry to cut you off there, but I wanted to hear you talk about that more. So go
Yes,
for it.
I like that quote. Who wrote
It's
that
great.
quote? Who
Great.
said
Great
that?
work. Great work.
Okay,
My
because look,
voice, your words.
look, it's true. You can't have a war without collaboration.
Mm,
War is the
mm,
is the fundamental breakdown of diplomacy and collaboration. So it's both of these things. And so we're capable of using power, our capacity, our hands, our
yeah.
brains, the ways in which we extend those through industrial processes. We're capable of using those things to do amazing, transformative work, and we're capable of using that to fight each other and destroy each other. And so that's why I call it a superpower, because
Right.
I'm not a big kind of Marvel universe guy, but superpowers always have their positives and their negatives.
Right. Right.
Um, and uh, and so I feel like your question is both on it's partially a political question of how do you get a group of people together within the context of a university to agree that working in collaboration will advance
Mm-hmm.
and benefit all of them,
Mm-hmm.
even if that means some of the things we currently do won't persist into the future.
Right.
That through collaboration, you may have to decide that the world has changed and we need to change with it, but we can collaboratively do something in the field of education across our different disciplines through our capacity as researchers and creators of uh, creative practice and and cultural artifacts and design and music and all of that, we can do more together than we can apart or in a kind of zero sum competition. And that's why I often put it in these evolutionary terms. It's like everyone thinks survival of the fittest is the sort of driving force of
Yeah.
evolution. I would actually argue it's collaboration.
Yeah.
And even collaboration with nature, right? Where in the, humans are also in our evolutionary history, we're making tools and those tools are changing our environment and our bodies are changing in relation to those tools. Like that, this is
Right.
it's a kind of Hegelian
Right. Right. Right.
and so it requires first and foremost goodwill and it requires courage to collaborate. You need to be willing to bring yourself fully to the engagement, and you need to be willing to be self-critical. You need to be able to say, to be open to real change. And so part of it is by being here for 20 years, I know a lot of people.
Right.
They, I think, for the most part, believe that they know me and that my intentions are genuine and sincere, and my love for the university is very deep. I really I just adore this place. It drives me crazy, but I
Yep.
adore this place. And it's in that space between, okay, let's maybe it shouldn't drive us so crazy. Maybe we could do some stuff different.
Right.
Um, but not for some neoliberal, like there's all the
Yeah.
critique you can imagine hearing. And
Yeah.
I get it all now because now they're kind of like, we thought we knew him. Do we really know him?
Right.
It's you have to have the trust. You have to be willing to meet people where they are. You can't end up in some kind of hierarchical power game that says, "Oh, I'm the president. We're doing it this way." You got to be a designer. And to
Right.
me, it's like, okay, put an idea out there and back it up with your presentation, and then give feedback and be willing to say, "Oh, you know what? That's better. It's better in that feedback, and maybe we can do this together." And so it's a real design process in the true sense of it. And we're in the middle of it right now at the new school. So I'm super excited about it because I'm seeing a level of collaboration that even just a year ago I felt might have been out of our reach.
Mm.
It's it's very exciting.
How far can this idea of collaboration be pushed? And I'm asking you to speak speculative here. I'm not putting you on the record of this is what you are going to do to the new school. But is there a world where, you study design not in the College of Design, or you study design and performance and anthropology, and that every student is kind of creating their own curriculum based on a set of interests so they can collaborate, like I don't like what is the role of the discipline? What is the role of the school? And how much can that be broken apart um, and then put back together? Do you have thoughts on what that could look like or how that could be shaped? You're laughing, so I'm assuming you do have thoughts.
I do. I got lots of thoughts. I'll try to keep them brief enough to actually not end up in the third hour of the podcast.
Okay.
Um, First and foremost, I believe we live in the Anthropocene. The short version, we live in a geological time in which humans are the principal transformative force on the planet. The Anthropocene is the age of the new human. There's lots of debate, and it's been critiqued and transformed, and we can go through the various different um, versions of that word that exist. But I believe we live in an age in which humans are literally transforming the world and are transformed by that world in that kind of dialectic. I say that because neither, and I, by the way, I don't think that's a good thing or a bad thing. I
Mm,
just think it's a thing. It's the time we live in. I can explain how the great acceleration gets us here and all of that, but
Yeah.
it's our
Right.
time. And the
Right.
most important thing is to understand the time you're living in. And then the second most important thing is, what do you do about it? And so we are living in this age in which our actions matter deeply and they matter very urgently to the immediate and long-term future. Um, and so what is the role of discipline in understanding the Anthropocene? Um, I am a big believer in disciplinary knowledge. I think you need deep knowledge to be able to act.
Mm.
I don't think
Hmm.
I don't think all of us becoming you know, half an inch
Right.
deep,
Right.
mile wide is going to be the answer to the Anthropocene. I think that would probably lead us further toward a rejection of expertise, the
Yeah. Yeah.
the right the contingency of knowledge and fact, and we live in a time in which science is just an opinion.
Right. Right.
Right. So I'm not somebody who thinks the answer to everything is cross-disciplinarity, but neither is the silozation of discipline.
Right.
And everyone can point to someone who didn't go to school to study something but became a genius, right? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's they didn't graduate or they dropped out or they didn't study this and they became, and those people exist. And Godspeed, right? I mean,
Right. Right.
brilliance is brilliance no matter where it comes from. I'm talking about the larger, like who we all are, who the rest of us are. And and in that context, I would say that there are aspects of a design education that belong in any education,
Yes. Yeah.
just as there are aspects of a humanities education that
Yes.
belong in any education.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds like I'm gonna be like, oh, you got to do your math and science and your reading and your writing. And okay, that's a kind of reductive version of it. But if you take that for our time, and you recognize some of the earlier parts of our conversation, I think it becomes a much more um, dynamic and
Yeah.
transformative way of learning. I I think it's important to read books and explore histories that have long historical tradition. And I think it's important to live in the moment we live in. And so this is not an either or. Um, and so how far can you push it? I don't really think there's a limit. Um, I think the fields are changing.
Yeah.
And and they'll all be they will be changed by artificial intelligence. I'm already someone who works very actively in collaboration with machines because, my ability to work in climate change is entirely dependent on the ability of supercomputing capabilities to model um, future climate scenarios that far exceed the human capacity. And I'm reliant on satellite technology to be able to extend my view back to the planet and out into the universe. And I'm dependent on scientists who do that work to interpret that information as extensions of their own bodies.
Yeah.
So this whole notion, it's not an either or. It is this collaboration. I don't typically call it artificial intelligence, by the way. I think it's collaborative human intelligence.
Mm, hmm.
I do think, and I will paraphrase the McCoys here in saying that and my dear friend Lucille Tenazis,
Hmm. Hmm.
who I'm sure you know, a
Yes.
brilliant
Yes.
communication and graphic designer, and is working with us very closely on the work this summer, has been reminding us that the McCoys have said something to the effect of designers who design like machines will be replaced by machines.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's the human, it's the intuitive that differentiates us and
Yeah.
brings the value. And I think that's the moment we're in, is we are finding what makes us human.
That's a really nice setup to what I hope I can turn into a question for you. I watched a video from 2015 where you were promoting the Global Executive Master of Science program. And you said something in that video that I haven't been able to stop thinking about because it feels right. Uh, but I also don't know how to actually do it or put it into practice. At the end of that video, you say that you don't think students decide that they want to be an MBA or that they want to be a master's of science. They decide what they want to do based on the kinds of issues they want to be addressing. That's one of those things where as soon as you said that in that video, I was like, yes, that's exactly right. And I'm wondering, thinking about that, thinking about what we've just been talking about disciplines and silos and collaboration, how does the institution, how does the university, the college, the design school best set itself up for students to take the issues they want to be addressing and then find the disciplines that they can best address those issues? How do we actually start to bring those things together?
Yeah. I'll, if I can amend your question by saying, how do we help them find the discipline
Yes.
for
Yes.
this moment,
Yes.
right? Because they're with us for 4 years,
Right.
6 years, maybe they stay a little longer than they don't graduate fast
Yeah.
enough. Um, and um, and I think it's very important to have that temporal frame to say wherever they are, again, you meet them where they are. I think that's the first part of
Yeah.
it. And and something will catch fire.
Mm.
You know this. You know this as a teacher.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what you can see it the moment it happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where a
Mm-hmm.
student is just they caught fire. They are so they've just they understand the world in that moment. They're rolling it and they're just going.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you wouldn't want to stop it, but even if you wanted to, you couldn't, right? And then a few years later, they're going to be like, did I, did that make sense?
Right. Right. Right.
It's a little bit like, it's like you were
Yeah.
telling me about your own graduate journey, right?
Yeah.
Where wait a minute, was that what I thought
Yeah.
I was doing?
Yeah.
And so we don't have to structure their whole lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
What we have to do is be relevant in this moment. We have to help them find the passion for this. We have to, I think we have to, in our time, we have to help them navigate the tsunami of social media
Mm.
that is diminishing our ability to have science-based, fact-based, evidence-based conversations and has replaced everything with opinion. Because they also need to be challenged to know that sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes I'm wrong. If we cannot embrace that and learn, if we can't learn, my mother used to say, um, uh, that everybody is educable. That was her phrase. Everybody's
Right.
educable. And I'm not sure, but I certainly like to believe that I can remain educable across my life.
Yeah.
And if we're willing to have that kind of courage, then I think the future is incredibly bright. But if we succumb to our most base fears and prejudices, we will end up destroying ourselves. And I don't mean to be dramatic. I really think that we have the
Yeah.
tools to do either. And so I am a very optimistic person because the opposite to me is uninteresting.
You mentioned earlier how much you love the new school. And I think, like I said, I've watched a bunch of interviews with you. I've watched a bunch of talks, and that love is palpable. In this conversation, it was palpable. And I think that last answer shows that when you talk about your love for the new school, you're talking about the people, you're talking about the students. And I think that really comes across in this conversation. I think we covered a lot of really interesting things. Thank you so much for doing this. This was great.
Thank you, Jarrett. This was a great joy. And when you're next up in New York, let me show you around all the changes we've made here.
I would love that. That was my conversation with the New School president, Joel Towers. Our theme music is by Jeremiah Chu. The show is funded thanks to the generosity of listeners like you. If you like what we're doing, I hope you consider supporting us on Substack and get some bonus content each month. You can follow us across social media at Surface Podcast. You can listen to all of our previous episodes wherever you get your podcasts and at our website, scratchingthesurface.fm. Thanks for listening.